You know those moments when you're doing what you love in your business? Maybe it's standing on stage or creating content. Whatever it is, you're totally immersed and time just seems to slip by. This is called the flow state.
At SpeakerFlow, we're obsessed with how to get you there more often. Each week, we're joined by a new expert where we share stories, strategies, and systems to help craft a business you love. Welcome to Technically Speaking. Boom.
We did it.
Hey,
look
everybody.
at us go.
We're live.
We know how to press buttons.
So excited to be here. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. It's so great to have you on this Friday morning for us. It's Brazil, right? Like, you've got to be in similar time zones to what we have here in the States.
What's the time zone difference? Is like it was 4 hours from the UK. When the clocks go back, it's then going to be 3 hours. So it's actually really good because I'm in near Sao Paulo, down in Florianopolis. So we are actually further east than New York, I think.
Yeah, but wow. I think it's a 2 hour difference from New York. I think it's 6 hour difference between New York and like London. And so anyways, fascinating. I'm still amazed that we can like have these types of conversations from different continents. So very cool.
Don't jinx it,
Thank
man.
you for joining us.
Not jinxing anything. Yeah, Austin just wrote knocking on wood there.
So I've never been to Brazil. I'm curious. Like, I know before we got into the recording, you said that you're attracted to the sunshine there. But what else do you like about Brazil? Like, why is that the place that you've chosen to hang out for a little while?
Interestingly, I met a guy on my last travels who didn't stop banging on about it, and I just gave in to him and said, "Fine, I'll come check it out." Basically. He's Canadian and he just like loves the place. He's like big into his surfing and stuff and the outdoors. And he was like, "Yeah, man, you got to come here. You'll love it." And so basically I did my research and saw like, what time zone is it in? How different is it from the UK? Can I get a reliable internet connection? And all of that kind of stuff that you think about when you're running a business fully remotely. And they all kind of aligned, and like accommodation out here is relatively cheap. Like I'm spending less than I would if I was living in the UK. The weather's pretty good. And, it's like that opportunity to just meet like-minded people and do different things. I think, segueing in a little bit to what we were talking about earlier is like, I would class myself as a creative. And I think as creatives, one of our highest needs is variety. And like, I've got a lot of clients and a lot of friends where if stuff is the same for too long, they start going a little bit insane. And so for me, like in the UK, when it gets gray and cloudy and it's like the same journey to work every day, like I just start to feel really down and like I lose my creative inspiration. So for me, if there's any opportunity to come where the sun is shining, where there's beach, where there's water, where there's mountains, where there's nature, and there's cool people, like-minded people doing stuff. Like last Sunday, I went sandboarding in the dunes. Like you definitely can't do that in Leeds.
Fun.
So it's just like, it's difficult to say no to those opportunities, I think.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome, man. Know yourself too. I mean, it sounds like you came to the self-awareness a long time ago that you need a change of pace and you act on it. There's a lot of people that would come to that realization and then just stay stuck. So good for you for not doing that.
It's difficult, man. Like, because one thing I've realized in life, and we're going to go pretty philosophical pretty quickly, but there's always a sacrifice, right? Like to have one thing, you always have to give something else up. So super difficult for me. Like there's a lot of relationships, close relationships I have back home in the UK, friends, family, romantic partners, things like that I've kind of had to say, look, I just need this for me. Like I need this for my soul. And I'm going to be gone for 3 months, maybe a little bit more. And that stuff's tough, but then you get all of the other nourishment and you meet other people and you get your connection and things in different ways. So yeah, overall, I think you've just got to do what you know is right in your gut, because otherwise you're just kind of making yourself suffer unnecessarily. Like if you have the opportunity to go and do that, and I kind of believe that everybody does, like if everyone wanted it enough, but most people don't, like they're not that bothered about travel or these things. Like a lot of people value security over variety or connection or whatever it is, right? So they've built their lives around that, and that's totally cool. Like maybe family is more important to them, and they've got kids and a wife, and like that's their kind of variety. But for me, I don't have those things, so I kind of get it in other places.
Totally,
Yeah, for
man.
sure.
I love
Is,
that.
is that
Man,
something you learned
starting
along the
out with
way?
some
Like,
mic
did you?
drops.
Yeah, that's right. Is that something you learned along the way, Matt, or did you just always know to act on
Oh no,
the
like
things
yeah,
that?
took me years to figure that stuff out, man. And I guess that's kind of
Yeah,
part of my backstory. And I've done this before, right? And I've been in a similar situation where I've been miserable. So I've like had the exact same situation but been miserable. And so like experiences like that teach me, okay, there must be something more going on here. Right? If you can have the exact same event, if you can have the exact same situation, and two people react to it in totally different ways, like it can't be the event or the situation that's creating the emotion. It must be something else. And like that's kind of what I've been figuring out, I suppose, over the last 6 to 7 years, and it's part of kind of what we help other people figure out as well.
no, that's awesome.
Oh, that's super
So
valuable.
tell us more
Yep.
about that. Tell us about your backstory, man. How did you start doing the work you're doing? I mean, helping creatives, freelancers, particularly in the realm of attracting their dream clients. It sounds like. I mean, I don't know about you, but you kind of just stumble into things along the way in life. I don't know if you woke up one day and was like, I want to do this when I grow up. So we usually find there's a little bit of a story there that led you to where you are. So what put you down that path?
Yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, rewind almost a decade now, and I was kind of in a similar situation. So I was traveling the world and I built this creative agency is a loose term. Like it was a kind of totally remote team. I just read the 4 Hour Work Week. So I was under this, impression that I was going to be like a one-man band with all of these freelancers all over the world delivering the work for me. And I remember it like vividly, like it was yesterday. And I'd been traveling for about 6 months and I'd gone all around the world with this like remote business. I've been posting Instagram photos like there was no tomorrow. I had one of those accounts, that you come across, which is like, Mondays are fine. You just hate your job. Like, don't you wish you were
Yeah,
me traveling
sure.
the world? Like, aren't I so cool? And there was this point I got to, I was in Canada and I was snowboarding. And it was probably like a Tuesday afternoon, and I'm sat on the side of this mountain. I've got this incredible view. There's people like whizzing past on skis and snowboards next to me. I'm sat there and I take this photo. I've still got it. I use it in my presentation sometimes. I take this photo um, of kind of like my snowboard strapped to my feet with this incredible view in the background. I'm about to upload it to Instagram when I just get this really kind of visceral gut feeling that I'm being totally disingenuous. Like, I don't know if you've ever had this where like you go to record a video and like post it on your story, or you do something, you're like, hey, look how cool this is. But behind the scenes, the reality is like you're pretty unhappy, or like stuff's not really how you're portraying it. And so I kind of stopped in that moment. I was like, I'm not going to post this photo. And then literally in that second, a message came through on my phone from my mom just saying, call me now. I need to talk to you, which is like never a good message to get from your mom when you're like
Yeah.
the other side of the world, right? And so I called my mom, and basically it turns out that like a close family friend had died suddenly and unexpectedly. And so I was like, this is a pretty big deal. I came back to the UK. I was like, I want to be with people. I want to, be present and not the other side of the world. And it was one of those moments, like I'm sure a lot of people have had, especially recently with things like COVID and all of the crazy stuff that's going on in the world at the moment, where you just kind of sit there and you reflect and you kind of look at yourself in the mirror and you say, like, is this really what I want to be doing? Like, what's going on? Because I'm traveling the world and from the outside, it looks like I'm super successful. But behind the scenes, I've got this sense of like deep kind of unfulfillment and just that I'm a bit lost and a bit bored. And so what the realization that I kind of had in that moment after, watching a bunch of TED Talks and listening to self-help videos and all the stuff that we do when we're a little bit lost, or at least I do, I had this realization that I'd left a job where I had one boss to start a business where it now felt like I had about 20 bosses. And I was kind of in this position where the relationship that I had with the clients in my business was just toxic. Like I was in a bad relationship, right? And I was doing work for people that I didn't really like. I was just saying yes to whatever came my way because I just needed to fund this, extravagant travel life, which really wasn't actually that extravagant, but it was like that was my purpose. It was like traveling was the thing that I thought was going to bring me the fulfillment. And it just kind of felt like if I wasn't doing this work, if I wasn't building the website, helping with the marketing, doing all of this stuff, then someone else would. I was just another kind of tool. And this client, like, as long as it was within their budget and within their price, then they were happy. But as soon as it was a little bit over, they're like, no worries, we'll just go to someone else. And I just felt like totally disposable. And so I guess I just knew that something had to change, right, in that moment. And I kind of decided, well, I'd probably rather be broke and working on really cool projects and doing something that's like really meaningful and fills me with a sense of purpose than just being able to have this travel lifestyle and work with clients that I didn't really want to work with. And I was lucky enough to meet and kind of have in my network already some very successful entrepreneurs, people that have built like multiple 7-figure businesses consistently and they sold them, and, you know, people that are just crushing it and they kind of seem to be happy. And so I'm the kind of person who's like, I don't know what you guys are like, but when I've got problems, I have to tell people about them, right? I can't like just bottle it up inside. I have to go and talk to everybody about like what's going on in my life and what the challenges are. So I started just sharing this with people. And it was super interesting because I realized that there were just some fundamental principles that I had totally ignored in my business. So things that are kind of like business 101 that I just never either really thought about or I just got completely wrong. And I think what had happened, and you mentioned this earlier, which happens to a lot of people, is that I'd spent so long mastering a craft, like trying to get good at building websites and web design and marketing and all of that stuff, that I totally neglected the like business of creativity. I was just going, hey, I've got this skill, someone can pay me for it. Who's out there that can pay me? And I was just saying basically yes to anybody that was going to pay me, right? And so I kind of went on this journey over the next few years of, you know, spending what little money I had left on mentors and coaches and taking these people out for dinner and just trying to kind of absorb as much information as possible from the people that kind of appeared to have both worlds. They had the purpose and the impact, and they also had the financial side of it. And what was fascinating was, out of all of the things that I learned, there were 3 to 5 kind of key principles that it seemed that myself and a bunch of other people in my network weren't following or weren't making. And so I just started to share this with my clients that I'd kept. I basically made a decision that I was going to fire about 80% of my clients because there was only 20% that I actually liked. And it just so happened that they were all other like creatives, basically. And so I started just sharing the stuff that I was learning with them. I was like, hey, by the way, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? And they started to implement it. And what blew my mind was the things that I was sharing for free, just because they were my clients and I liked them, were having more impact on their bottom line than all of the stuff that they had paid us to do. Wow. And I was like, something is wrong here. Like, that is backward. What is going on? And I guess the business just kind of evolved because I learned to, instead of focusing on my skills and the things that I had built up over the years, I learned to really listen to the clients. And instead of thinking about like, what did I want to do? I started thinking about who did I want to help? What problems did I want to solve? And by switching my focus from like internal me, what do I want? I want to travel the world and I want this great business and I want these things, to external, like, who do I want to help? All of a sudden I started to feel this sense of purpose. I started to feel this like, oh, actually, there's a problem out there which isn't just about web design or marketing or whatever. It's like more fundamental than that. And there's some psychological stuff that really fascinates me and how people perceive themselves. And I started to realize how all of the things that had happened to me up until this point, kind of as Steve Jobs says in his famous Stanford commencement speech, like, you can only join the dots looking backwards. And so when I started to focus on the who and the problem, I realized that I was actually in a unique position to help very specific people, which Taylor already alluded to, is kind of freelancers and small agency owners. Because that journey that I'd been on, I realized once I'd kind of figured a lot of stuff out, that there was a bunch of other people that were in the exact same position that I was in, just like, 5 years behind kind of thing. And so, yeah, I just thought, well, what about if I turn this into a business? Because I'd always been, as you could probably tell from like when we first started talking, I'd always been into kind of like personal development. I'd always been fascinated with learning about like how the mind works and all of that kind of stuff. And so all of a sudden I started to think about, instead of just focusing on that skill set that I'd been focusing on for the past few years of web design and marketing and things like that, what about if everything that I'd ever experienced in my life in some way, shape or form actually put me in a unique position to solve a problem for someone? And it's like those combination of things were the key to solving that problem, not just that one skill set. And so when I started focusing on that, it gave me this whole like new lease of life, because it was like, imagine if I could build a business out of all of these things that I love, like out of all of the things I'm interested in, but more importantly, build a business around people that I actually want to help and problems that I feel passionately about solving. And so for me, that was the switch. And that was where the new business, if you like, was born and just kind of evolved from there. And it started like, kind of marketing consultancy, business consultancy for creatives and creative agencies. And we used to work with artists and all kind of things. And it's just evolved gradually. But one thing that's never changed is the passion for the problem, which is essentially the root of the problem is that most creatives never went to business school. They went to learn how to create and do the thing that they're good at. And they're just lacking some fundamental, it's not even knowledge. It's just fundamental principles around business that can allow them to be so much more fulfilled in the work they do, have way more freedom when it comes to who they work with, when they work, all of that kind of stuff. And more importantly, the kind of like financial security and the financial side of things that, when we can stop worrying about paying the bills or how we're going to feed our staff or all of that stuff, that's when really you kind of get into that self-actualization. And that's when you can really create your best work, I believe.
Yeah. Man, that's so true. Story. We see the exact same thing with, the creatives that we work with, speakers, coaches, consultants, authors, podcasters, trainers, entertainers. They all sort of fit into this category where typically there's a craft that's been developed over time. And though they're really good at delivering that craft, it doesn't necessarily translate into a successful business. And so there's a steep learning curve or a brick wall that you end up hitting over time when you realize like, oh, I've got to like level up my larger skill set around running a business before it's going to really go anywhere. And you gave a couple really good examples of that, knowing who the best person is to take advantage of your expertise and where to find them. And I'm curious from your angle, like what are some of those other business fundamentals that you see are missing from a lot of creative businesses outside of ideal client profile, let's label it, and maybe like knowing what problem you solve?
Yeah, there's actually three things. I basically went through this exercise where I took everything that I'd learned, like almost every book I'd read, every seminar I'd been to, every coach that I'd worked with, and tried to just say, if I had to boil this down into three core principles, three key things that basically everybody is saying, what would that be? And it took me a while, but essentially what I realized is the three things that every kind of creative business owner needs to do if they want to find the right clients, if they want to charge more money, if they want to have the kind of freedom to pick and choose who they work with, is number one, they have to differentiate themselves from the competition. Like if you can't differentiate yourselves from like another studio that offers the same service as you, then automatically you just become a commodity. And clients look at you and they say, oh yeah, I understand what you do, animation, photography, design, whatever. These guys also do that. Let's go see how much they charge. How much do you charge? And from a client's perspective, it's like, looking at cars. It's like, oh, it's a BMW or it's an Audi or whatever. It's like, there's only a certain amount of things that you can tweak, but probably a lot of your purchase is going to be decided on how much does this cost, right? Because there's no differentiation. The second thing is like the way that we communicate with those people. And there's a few kind of facets to this which we could probably dive into, but essentially it's around how consistently you're able to communicate with your ideal clients. And when you communicate with them, what are you saying? Are you able to articulate their problems better than they can? Are you able to really understand what's going on in their world and present an offer to them that is going to fix those problems and that is really clear how it fixes those problems. And then the third and final thing is the delivery. Like, how do you actually deliver your services? And most agencies these days are trading time for money in some form or another. So actually, it's kind of an exponential curve, but in the wrong way. So the better they get, the more effective they get, the less they get paid or the less that they can charge.
That's a good point.
And what it also means is that they can never really step away from the business. And so these kind of like higher level things that we need to think about as creatives, whether it's strategy or direction or kind of like bringing all of your background and knowledge and skill set together in order to solve this problem. Like, you don't get a chance to do that because you're stuck in the day to day of, if we don't deliver this project, we're not going to get paid, or the client's not going to be happy or whatever. And so even simple things like taking a holiday or not checking your emails on the weekend or whatever, it's like they're tied into the business in some form. So the final thing they need to do is essentially, instead of selling services, sell products. So it's kind of productizing the service so that it has a repeatable, predictable outcome, and it has steps in that process that other members of your team can follow and deliver that end result for the client, whether you're there or not. And so that's kind of the process of like unpacking your intellectual property and understanding actually how you get the result that you get for your client. So essentially what I created, I wrote a book about it, which actually, if you guys are up for putting in the show notes, I'm giving away a bunch of free copies. So I can put a link for anyone that wants to kind of dive down a little bit more into these. But writing a book is such a great way to just get all of the stuff out of your head down onto paper and consolidate it. But yeah, I kind of wrote a book and put it in a framework. But essentially, when it comes to those fundamental business things, it's really just about those three core pillars. How do you differentiate yourself from competition? How do you communicate the value of what you do to your ideal clients consistently? And how do you deliver that result to them in a way that is scalable, predictable, and repeatable?
Oh, man. Those are just the golden truths right there. Right. And what I love about that final bit, that's right, let's end it. What I love about that final bit about developing a process is that it's almost like a feedback loop in a way back to differentiation. I don't know what you found in your own experience, but we found is that once you have a process that you can coin, that you label, something that you walk through with every single time with somebody, it's a very small likelihood anybody else that they're benchmarking you against, your competition, has that exact same process. And that can reinforce the differentiation aspect of what you do, because chances are fewer people have labeled a process that they follow to achieve the outcome you're promising in the conversations that you're communicating in, like, step 2, for example. Am I on the right track there?
Absolutely. The offer is definitely one, or the deliverables and the way your process is definitely one of the ways that you can differentiate yourself. To add another layer to that, the way that we use differentiation is we talk a little bit more around niche. So we actually do an exercise with our clients. You know, I said to you, I came to this realization with the help of some mentors and coaches, but I came to this realization that I was in a unique position to solve a problem for someone. So everything that had happened to me, all of my interests, all of my themes, all of those things kind of came together. We do that with our clients. So real quick example for you. There's a guy I love talking about, Scott. And when I first started working with Scott, he kind of told me, you know, I run a design studio. I'm a designer. I'm passionate about design. I'm like, cool, man, great, happy for you, but just sound like every other designer in the world. So how do we differentiate you? And we started to unpack his story, and he started to bring things about these expeditions he'd been on in Nepal and how he goes climbing every week. And like, all of a sudden it started to really add up to me. And if you see a photo of Scott, like, he's quite a bohemian guy. He's quite obviously into his outdoor and adventure. And so I was like, Scott, how can you bring more of this into your business? And so we kind of differentiated by, instead of him just being like just a design studio, it was like, actually what we specialize in, and we specialize in helping outdoor and adventure brands to bring their ideas to life through visually engaging content. And so like, one of the fastest ways people can differentiate is just to be specific about who they help. And usually that they're already being pointed in that direction. Like, when you look back through your story and you look at your passions, you look at who you hang out with, you look at the experiences you've had in your life, it's already kind of pointing you in a direction. And as a result of that, Scott won Red Bull as a client. And the way that he did that was because he was communicating consistently, but he was doing it in a way that was relevant to the people that he wanted to work with rather than surrounding it around design. Because those people, unless they're specifically looking for a designer, in which case they've probably already got some people in their mind who exist in their network, and they're like, oh, we need some design, let's go to Bob or whatever. Unless they're at that stage, if they're not looking for design and they're just thinking about their current problems and what's going on in their business, they're not going to relate to Scott, who's a designer. Like it's not relevant to their world. They will, however, relate to Scott, who's been on this expedition, who's done this crazy climb, and because that's what they're into, right? And so then you build a real genuine connection, and that gives you the opportunity to kind of dig down and uncover what's going on in their business. And like 9 times out of 10, if you've done this correctly, what you'll see is you'll hear some challenges, you'll hear some things that they're experiencing, which you can use your combination of skills, network, passions, all the stuff, in your story to solve that problem. And I think when people realize that, it totally transforms the way that they not only think about themselves, but also how they think about their business.
Oh man, this is a message that needs to get shared far and wide for as long as possible, because it's so true. Like there's a far more eloquent phrase than I'm about to use for this, but something like, if you try to appeal to everyone, you appeal to no one, right? Like, because to your point, like people want to connect with people that they feel like understand them. Like we're very social creatures, and just the nature of humanity is that we want to feel understood. And so if we take that seriously, then the best way that we can do that is to just let our truest selves shine through, because though you won't appeal to everyone, the people that do resonate with it are going to be far more likely to be able to dig deep with you, and you will be able to have the opportunity to help them feel understood. And then as soon as somebody feels understood, as long as you have a solution to their problem, they'll probably go with you. There's no reason not to. This is one of the biggest problems that we see people have in this space. And I think it's really important that people understand that their unique story is the thing that makes them sellable. It's not just the service that they can find anywhere.
Yeah, well, it's the only thing that makes them unique. Like everything else can be copied. Your style, the clients you've worked with on your portfolio, the way you deliver your service, like the quality of your service, all the things that people say differentiate them from their competition. It's like whether your competition can deliver that or not is another question, but they can definitely say it. And there's plenty of people out there who can say it in a more convincing way than you and will probably get the work, even if they can't do it as well as you can. And that's often what people find is like the frustrating thing about this whole process.
Yeah, man. So it seems to me that not only are focusing on those 3 things that you outlined, differentiation, communicating your value consistently, and so on, does that tie into being more purposeful or being more fulfilled in the business, doing the things you like, attracting your ideal clients? But it would seem to me as well that if all of those things are in place, pricing your services would be a lot easier because you're not being benchmark, or pricing for the services that you want to make, the money that you want to make would be a lot easier because you're not pricing yourself as a commodity anymore. So do you find that prices increase for those services as someone perfects those 3 things, or are there other components to being able to command the fees that one wants?
There are definitely other components, but 100%, like, because there's nothing else to compare it to, right? And one thing that we try and drill home to our clients is that price is relative. And people seem to forget that. If you say, like, just throw a number at someone, $100,000, is that a lot of money or not a lot of money? Well, it totally depends. Like, what are you comparing it to? Right? Like, $100,000 is not a lot for $1 million home, right? But it is a lot for a watch. So if people don't have any benchmark, then what they should be benchmarking it to is like, what is the potential upside of us helping you solve this problem? And what is the potential downside of you not solving that problem? And what we encourage our clients to do is just go after people or go and help people where that is a big gap, right? Where the potential upside is big and the potential downside is big. So there's like a big problem to solve.